looking at that as a housing play where there's a lot of potential to spill over for good housing, that's something that's very interesting.
And how easy is it to do such a thing? Because normally the zoning does not allow for both.
So you're right. Zoning doesn't allow for both, but there's so much demand for housing today. Like municipalities love it.
So they don't push back if you're
They're
gonna
not
convert
pushing
it.
back because it's a good social cause, especially if you're willing to accommodate it as affordable housing. You're going to get a lot of cooperation from municipalities just in general.
Welcome back to REI Hot Seat. Andrew Hines here with Jacob Campagnaro and David Atwell. And today we're talking hotel conversions into multifamily. Dave is an expert in that. And I'm going to give the company names and such because I know you have HoneyTree, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Is that the right company I should be talking about?
That's the one.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So you tell us, your founder, co-founder, director.
Yeah, co-founder of HoneyTree.
Yeah.
We started HoneyTree in 2016. I was working in the movie business and buying some rental properties. And then many of my colleagues asked to invest with me, started buying multifamily, and then became very interested in the hotel business around 2018, discovering lots of good technology and automation to save a lot of money and increase your NOI. So kind of went in the direction of hospitality back in 2018. But interesting enough, with CMHC, MLI, and great financing programs, there's definitely a great opportunity in converting hotels into multifamily, which is something I'd love to talk to you guys about.
Well, yeah, I want to know because for those who've been following me for a while, will probably have seen you on the podcast one or two times, and then I think you've been on REI Hot Seat before too.
Actually, I haven't yet.
No? Okay. So a couple of times on the podcast for those who care to venture back and listen to those episodes. But as far as I knew, yeah, you were in the high automation hospitality. So
correct.
Digital concierge, if I got that right.
Yeah.
And people can show up to the hotel. They're not actually seeing people. They can check in. Everything's automated, which is brilliant because obviously the expense line in hospitality is hugely employees.
Absolutely.
Usually, right?
And that's something that, Andrew, you and I,
we
new
know
venture
very well
that we
From the
started
campgrounds.
exploring. No,
Yeah.
it's really interesting because it's like I never doing multifamily all the time. Your expenses are kind of normalized. It's like, it's pretty. And then when I started getting into the hospitality side of things, I was like, we were, our first year,
employees
we're
are the
sitting there
biggest
looking at our
expense.
thing going, well, how much should an employee cost? What should your bottom line be for employees? And, and all those other items. How much do you spend on soaps? And
a lot
so
of it varies by location too, and your availability of good labor, right? And it's not something you can standardize like you can with multifamily. So if you're in Montreal versus Quebec City, or if you're like out in like Grotto Getaway, you're going to have different labor pools, different labor expenses.
Yeah, and it's typically a little tougher, although every year is different. It's a little tougher up where we are because in the summer, every available housing unit is used for like a short-term stay.
Yeah.
So there's no accommodations for employees.
The staff.
I always say this. We have the advantage because we'll let our staff stay on site. Like we have trailers for them, so we can get people, kind of bring them over, and that's our little carrot. And it's actually worked, but largely our workforce is just local people.
Yeah.
High school kids, a lot of them.
Well, a lot of markets are like that. Like Mont-Tremblant, as an example, like there is great hotels to buy there. It's impossible to staff. So we've actually turned down a couple of deals in Mont-Tremblant specifically because it's known like you're not going to be able to operate it. You have nobody to do the work.
Interesting. Yeah. What can you do? Can't you bring in? What is the typical approach to that when you find it hard to get people?
Well, I mean, generally speaking, you're going to find the locals that are buying the real estate and actually operating it. People who are living there. We're Toronto based, so I would love to have a hotel near Mont-Tremblant Resort, but I just know it's going to be impossible to operate.
That's a great spot to
unfortunately, I have to pass on the opportunity a lot of the time.
Very logical. Okay, so you've sort of pivoted though now. So now you're looking at the MLI Select program and what you can get done there, realizing that, hey, if I can do a few just regular multifamily, why not?
Yeah, so like I still love hospitality, and I've been vocal about this in the past. Like the window is closing, and there's a ton of operators out there who have figured out self check-in. So unfortunately, the great hotel deals, they're going to be fewer and far between. And so now we're looking at it. Okay. And actually, not to mention, with interest rates and bond rates coming back down, multifamily is looking very attractive again, right? Even still in secondary markets in Southern Ontario. So if you have a great hotel asset, but maybe it's not a primary market, maybe we're in Owen Sound, maybe we're in Niagara Falls, looking at that as a housing play where there's a lot of potential to spill over for good housing, that's something that's very interesting.
And how easy is it to do such a thing? Because normally the zoning does not allow for both.
So you're right. Zoning doesn't allow for both, but there's so much demand for housing today. Like municipalities love it.
So they don't push back if you're
They're not pushing back because it's a good social cause, especially if you're willing to accommodate it as affordable housing. You're going to get a lot of cooperation from municipalities just in general.
And is like maybe in Quebec with your hotels that you're doing, is there a way that you can keep them as hotels, but then allow long-term rental in those buildings? Like, can you split the difference in some way?
Yeah, but you don't want to from an operating perspective,
right?
Because when you start mixing the different kind of groups, because the people are going to stay at your hotel, and it's renovated, they're trying to be a little bit nicer of a clientele versus renting bachelors in a downtown. It's either students, young professionals, or long-term bachelor.
But you will
tenants.
see even here in Burlington new stuff where it's half apartments, half hotels.
Yeah, and generally you'll have like one floor that's segregated of like hotel, one floor that's so
you could do something like that.
Yeah, you could do something like that for sure.
And is that something you guys will entertain? And how does bylaw typically feel about that? Or because you're kind of playing in a need area, hey, we'll make X number of units for long-term stay.
Yeah, so that's an interesting one. Like in Montreal specifically, we're so close to universities where there is a good opportunity to have like student rentals from September to May and then hotel from May to September.
Oh, that's beautiful.
It is beautiful. Now, the challenge is you still can't really get CMHC financing. As soon as you tell them...
there's going to be hotel use.
You're not getting in the business of hiding these things. Like as soon as...
The only other thing you could do is, and I don't know if this would float, but get another company and have slightly different ownership, and then they rent the unit longer term, and then that goes on.
So one thing we considered actually was to allow the tenant to Airbnb their unit.
Yes, like Airbnb arbitrage.
But they would have to set up their own Airbnb account. So we would have like 25 accounts for one property.
That's right.
Now, Montreal and Quebec specifically have capped it to 90 days per year that you can run it as a short-term rental. And it keeps getting harder and harder.
But if you're hotel zoning, then wouldn't you be?
Then it shouldn't be a problem. We have one deal specifically where it was hotel zoning.
But if you change away, then you're back into the short-term stay bylaw.
Right? Yeah. And so now it's going back into residential. So it's a very slippery slope. It's quite difficult, specifically in markets like Montreal and Quebec where they're very socially oriented. But now if we're talking like, I don't know, Niagara Falls in Ontario, just in general, you'll have a lot more flexibility in terms of, okay, I want to operate as residential. We're going to delegate this portion of the hotel as residential. We'll keep this as hotel. But your financing will still have difficulties. And that's always going to be the deal breaker. You won't be able to put a CMHC mortgage on a hotel and run it as a hotel. Like it has to be.
So you got to go full. Yeah. So there's no sense in going halfway. You might as well just go.
There's no sense. There's no benefit. To my understanding, what they would do is they would look at the lease on a 12-month calendar and say, okay, if you're there for 9 months, a student rental, we're going to take the monthly income, divide it into 75%, and apply that to your gross income. So if you're renting it for $1,800 a month and you say it's from September to May, they're going to take away.
They're just going to cut it away. Yeah.
They're going to cut away $450 from that gross rent.
Somebody asked me this question the other day, and I didn't know how to answer it, so I told them I'd get back to them. But it was exactly that. It was so if it's a furnished rental, and you're renting it for, let's call it midterm, right? Like we're not talking nightly, but monthly,
like say 6 months out of the year.
6 months at a time. It's rented and then off, then on, multiple tenants. How does CMHC look at that? Because they were saying, like, what if I just bought a building, but half of the building was furnished rental? We still have lease agreements, but how does CMHC look at furnished rental? Because there's going to be a premium on the rental amount.
That's right.
Potentially,
like probably 50% more.
Correct, because it's furnished. Now, does CMHC take away the furniture number? Like, how do they work on that?
Yeah, so I've never actually financed one with CMHC with a furnished rental, but to my understanding, they will take the value of the furniture out of the gross loan amount.
They will, okay.
Right? And in fact, I spoke with Troy about this as well. And it's so, like, let's say you have a bachelor that normally rents for $1,400.
Troy's a mortgage, a commercial mortgage specialist
I was talking
at
to
CMHC.
Troy over at CMLS.
Yeah, sorry, CMLS,
but if, say, a bachelor rents for $1,600, or you can get somebody in there doing midterm stays for $2,000 per month. So they're not going to look at it as a $2,000 per month lease for 12 months of the year. They're only going to honor 6 months of that. So now your gross revenue for that whole unit for the year is only $12,000, $1,000 per month.
So I was actually on Brooke Hicks' podcast a couple weeks ago, and that was a question she had, because she was saying, I have all these furnished units, I'm getting premium rent. Does that mean I can just apply that premium rent to CMHC underwriting.
So CMHC is not taking your rents. Are they just looking at what's a normal market rent in that area? They're not looking at your rent roll. Is that right?
Generally speaking, yeah. Now, if you have a 1-year lease for furnished rental, they will honor that amount, but they are going to put in an amount for the furniture specifically. And so I like I said, I haven't done one of these deals
that's the
entirely.
trick, is getting a year. If you
getting
get the
a full year for sure.
But less than that, they're just going to give you market rent, basically.
Yeah.
Which will be less than what you can get.
Yeah. And like say you have a 25-unit hotel and they may say, okay, you have 20 grand worth of furniture per unit, which is insanely high. It's not going to be that much. They'll reduce the loan amount by $500,000 because they're allocating that to the furniture value.
Interesting. Yeah. That's what we wanted you on for these tidbits.
Well, yeah. I guess how do we make this something useful for the audience here? I mean, because what you're doing seems like so large scale. Like, are you going after? Like, tell us what kind of buildings you're going after, where you're going after them.
Yeah. So right now I'm still chasing after hotel deals. There are a few great ones in Montreal specifically, and it's in that value add space. It's the same formula that I had the last time I was on the show. Something that's out of date, that's run down, that does not have that self check-in. If I find something like that, I love it, right? Of course. But now with the CMHC financing, MLI being so attractive, I mean, it always was, but bond rates coming back down, now starting to look at distressed markets or distressed assets in Southern Ontario. But like I said, another important one, the hotel conversion. So if we're looking at, say, like secondary or tertiary markets, one of the problems is if you say get like a 60-unit motel and convert it into housing, well, you're in a secondary, tertiary market. You generally have tougher audiences that's going to be renting from you, and you put these many people together under one roof. It tends to be a difficult operation to manage. So,
and is that also because of the typically a hotel room's not going to turn into a 2-bedroom apartment? It's going to be a bachelor.
That's right.
Right, with a kitchen and a bed.
That's right. And generally speaking, tenants of bachelors are higher maintenance. They're more work and they cause more damage. Now, one thing that's interesting that I've been looking at is making a deal with the municipality and say, okay, we're going to take this 60-unit hotel and we're going to convert it into affordable housing, but I want to make a deal with the city. The city's going to manage it. So the city writes me a check and they have to return it to me in the condition that I provide it to them. So we give them a fully renovated building, kitchens in every unit, and it's going to be $1,000 a unit per month. We'll lock that in for 10 years. Yeah. But I want the check from that city writing me a check.
They'll do that?
So there was actually
some cities will do that.
There was a building for sale, and I forget which municipality it was in. It was a smaller town, and it was this beautiful building, and the purchase rate was so cheap. And I looked at it probably, like this was 3-4 years ago, but I looked at it probably 6 times to 6 different people because they kept bringing it to me. Be like, Jake, why is this such a good deal? And then they had that exact formula, which was the city was managing it. Yeah. You would get a check, or it wasn't even the city. It was a third party, affordable housing.
Whoever.
That sounds like Section 8 in the U.S.
Very similar.
Yeah. Similar to that.
So there's companies that do that. The only challenge with that building, and I'm sure it's the same thing you're going to say, is it stagnates the appreciation.
See, that I wouldn't even necessarily mind too much because I'm not buying in a tertiary market for it to go up in value. I'm buying it strictly for the cash
flow. For the cash flows. So are you looking in Ontario, tertiary markets?
Yeah, definitely. I would say more so secondary markets. I'm not quite going to tertiary, but secondary markets for sure.
Give us an example of a secondary market.
I mean, I like Burlington quite a lot. No, Burlington. This is primary.
You think it's primary? Okay.
Yeah,
it's secondary to Toronto.
Primary is spilled over into secondary markets. It's getting pushed out, right?
Yeah.
So, like, I love Brantford. If you look at the cap rates in Brantford, if you look at average rents and average cap rates in cities across Ontario, Brantford jumps out. The cap rate's slightly higher. The rents are actually quite low, so it's affordable. There's still room to grow in Brantford.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And it's a big enough city. Like, we're not talking, a little tiny town.
It's just got a lot of the stigma that Hamilton used to have.
Exactly, and it will get spillover from Hamilton, from London, from Guelph, which is great.
And I always looked at, I always looked at Brantford and thought it was, in my opinion, superior to Hamilton. And maybe I'm crazy for saying that. I don't know. But I looked at it is a bit cleaner in some areas. It's less heavy industrial. It's more light industrial.
That's true.
Right? There's university there now. Like, I know Hamilton's got Mac. We got Brantford's got Laurier. I don't know. Like, maybe I just haven't sold enough buildings there. I'm not sure. But I looked at it and go, I like the metrics better because of the cap rates, I guess is where I'm going, right? The cap rates are better.
But there's also runway for growth, right? So when you look at a one bedroom and a fully renovated one bedroom, $1,600 in Brantford versus Hamilton being like $1,900, there's still potential for that to grow because eventually you're going to hit a price ceiling in Hamilton where people just can't afford to pay any more money. So they'll end up spilling over and there's going to be more
they'll
demand.
go. Brantford's such a logical move because
it's such a good
because it's
town.
so close to all these areas. You know, you're not far from Woodstock, you're not far from Kitchener-Waterloo, you're not far from Burlington,
and as Cambridge grows, it's almost like
engulfing
they're almost touching now, right? Like you look at Cambridge, you look at Paris, Ontario, you look at Brantford, it's all kind of growing into a big cluster of a city there.
It's an affordable housing haven. Like you're getting lots of spillover from these other secondary markets. You know, I consider Brantford, it used to be a bit of a tertiary market. It's kind of on that cusp. It's definitely a secondary market, but you're getting spillover. And that's what I love because that's just a great runway for demand and growth.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So you're working on some projects in that area?
Yeah, we got some deals that Jacob and I are working on in Brantford. Quite excited about that. I don't want to say too much yet.
Yeah, I know you can't say everything.
Diligence. But there's good stuff in Brantford. But yeah, on the hotel topic though, there is definitely good stuff out there. If I were someone that's listening to the show right now looking to get into a hotel conversion, definitely speak with the municipality and speak with them. Say, I want to convert this into affordable housing. What can you do to help me? There's usually some sort of grant or incentive that they'll give you money per unit that you're converting. CMHC loves it. And actually on that note, CMHC is updating their definition of affordable housing. So they've been using statistics from 2019 and there's been rumors going around it was coming in 2024, first in September, then November, December.
I kept hearing December because they promised. Now I don't know what's going to happen.
Like who knows when we're going to get it. But once those numbers are out and that information's updated, you're going to see a lot more affordability MLI applications. And those secondary, tertiary markets, that's a great one. So speak with the municipality, see if there's grants and approvals, but try to make a deal where they'll actually manage it for you. Because it's going to be super high maintenance to manage those type of tenants unless you live in that town.
And what if you find a great deal, Dave, but the city or there's no companies that are ready to manage in that area? Like, would you just allot for a ridiculously high property management fee?
Exactly. Yeah, I would just slaughter my expenses and just bake in such a high expense ratio because you know it's going to be way more to manage, way more for maintenance. Way more for vacancies. It's going to be a lot of work.
So just pad those numbers up.
Just pad it.
Yeah.
So are you what kind of percentage for maintenance are you allocating, or are you going by a percentage?
I would say generally speaking, about 45 to 50% of the income I would allocate to expenses. Just
for a multifamily, just go right
for a hotel conversion.
Hotel conversion into multifamily, and you're saying that because these are typically laid out like a bachelor.
That's right.
Yeah. And you will only buy them if they have a kitchenette.
Well, we can install them for sure.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's definitely part of the business model, but definitely padding the expenses and using just a much higher cap rate. And being realistic with my expectations. I do want to finance 100% loan to cost, 95% loan to value. But if I'm using an 8 cap or a 10 cap, I know there's a lot of buffer zone in that between reality. Yeah. But your debt service coverage on that's going to be enormous. You want at least 1.4 to 1.6 for all that aggravation of managing a higher maintenance asset. There has to be a lot of cash flow and a very comfortably buffered expense ratio.
Yeah, I like it. Yes. Pad your numbers. Be conservative, not optimistic when you're setting out your numbers. Because, I mean, if you imagine being in that situation, managing something like that, and like not even breaking even or something.
Yeah, and you're operating on a razor's edge. You're on a tightrope. You have to be perfect to even break even. One thing I always say, like when you're looking at cap rate, you need to figure out your level of risk. The higher level of risk, the higher that cap rate has to be. So if you're saying, oh, it's a multifamily and low density multifamily in Owen Sound. Well, that's going to have like a 5 or 6 cap. I'm padding that aggressively if I have 60 bachelor units under one roof. That cap rate's got to go up because the risk is much higher.
Versus if it's all 2 beds, it's pretty marketable.
Yeah.
Now, is there conversions that you've seen or found where it is 2 beds, 1 beds? Like I guess like furnished apartments or something like that.
Not really.
Right? It's mostly because I get a lot of people that call me, and I've turned down some people in the past that say, "Hey, find me a motel that I can convert." Right, and on paper it looks great, but these guys were so ill prepared, and I was like, this is going to be a nightmare.
I'm having a hard time even picturing it. Like, I mean, you would see them transact more. How often do you see hotels come up for sale?
Quite a bit. Like,
really? Are they name brand hotels or
no,
just like
usually
mom
like,
and
usually
pop?
the mom and pop.
Like picture this, right? Lundy's Lane, Niagara. You got a million little motels that are 30 units, 40 units, 20 units.
So you're getting like the little ones where you park right in front of your room, that kind of thing? Yeah. Is that some of the stuff you have?
So I don't have any of that.
No? Okay.
No, but that's stuff we look at for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, most of your stuff
those are
is
convenient, right? Because you can just go right up to your room. Obviously, there's a nice factor to that.
But it's like surface parking multifam. Like that's the way I kind of look at it and go like, no underground parking, no elevators,
no common hallways.
There's no common hallways.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Right? It's not usually not sub-metered, so you have to look into sub-metering them if possible. But usually there's a good power supply. Right? Like, I don't know if you've ever run into a hotel deal where it's like 60 amp into a hotel room. Like, it's usually what?
Yeah, they usually have a lot more power.
They usually have more power. From my experience, it
is a commercial property after all, right?
Yeah, they'll be done more aggressively.
Yeah. But I think that one of the key ingredients, though, it's like you don't actually want to own this thing forever. You're looking at the land and the redevelopment potential. Yeah. Because motels are usually sitting on a significant amount of land.
Yes.
So it's nice to have that cash flow, say 5 to 10 years, but in the background, you're getting your SPA approval prepared.
Yeah. I like that. Okay, so the two-prong approach where you got the cash flowing asset with development play.
Yeah, and then you just hold it until it economically makes sense to bulldoze and develop it. And generally speaking, the longer you wait, the better. Rents are going to go up. The city's going to get more desperate for housing. There's more incentives, et cetera.
I like it.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I think that probably is a nice opportunity for us to segue to a final thought for this episode. So any sort of words of wisdom you'd share, just given your experience, number of years in the biz, people wanting to dive into this, what would you say to them?
I would say a lot of people focused on appreciation from 2010 to 2020. Everyone was investing for appreciation until they realized you can't live off of it and you actually need cash flow. Mm-hmm. So look at cap rates, look at your cash flowing. You want to buy cash flowing assets. People learned that the hard way over the past 3 years. And yeah, it's great. You can underwrite a deal. You can get fantastic appraisals that show how much the property's got up in value. But if you're not actually selling it, that's not real value. You're not going to benefit from that.
Yeah.
So I would say focus on the cash flow and invest for cash flow.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better. I've been singing the cash flow song since I started my podcast. You can't mess with cash flow. I've been in situations where there's not enough of it, and it's always painful.
Yeah, and if you have a nice portfolio of cash flowing assets and you want something that appreciates like crazy, that's fine. You can get that one asset and supported by the cash flow.
Exactly.
But invest for cash flow.
Yeah. Yeah. Jake, any thoughts? Anything you want to share? Because I know you guys work together a lot. So
couldn't agree more on that final comment. And I think we're starting to see that in the market a lot. There is cash flowing assets out there, right? I still have people coming to me saying there's no good deals, and it's like, no, you're just not looking. Like there's a lot of good deals out there. Cash flow was a dirty word 4 years ago because it didn't exist. Now it's now it's exactly that. Like we want to see it. So no, look at it. I like the motel conversion, the hotel conversion. I think it's a very cool play. It's something that's bringing rental housing to the market, and just find the right property management.
And that's pushing your business downhill, as you've sort of pointed out, because the municipalities are all screaming for housing. So you're not going to get a lot of pushback when you want to add units.
Absolutely.
At least not compared to what you would have 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, guys. Well, thanks for tuning into today's episode. If you found value in this, obviously show the channel some love. We'll make sure that we include some information, maybe your website.
Yep.
HoneyTree Grow.
HoneyTreeGrow.ca.
Okay, that'll be below. And then make sure you're on the REI Hot Seat Insiders list. The link for that will be below. That's where you get all the gold nuggets and goodies and off-market deals that come through Jake's office. So with that said, we'll see you guys next week. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.